Hey everybody, so this is part 2 of my Dune will probably stink or will probably suck video. I hope that you watched all the way through part 1. I know these things were super long, so I thank you for coming and tuning in to this part. In this part, we're going to talk a little bit about what I think about how Warner Brothers thinks of this actual movie and a few things that I probably would have changed or added if I were part of the actual production squad. Okay, so I hope that you enjoy the rest of the video. Thank you.
Wow.
What are you going to do then? Then we go to some of the other things. I guess it did break even and make a little bit of money, but it only made like $400 million. And one of the things that people swore up and down was the reason for this is because, COVID. No. I'm going to dispel some of these arguments that you guys had about why this movie did not make a lot of money. And I will leave you really with only one argument. The idea that, well, it didn't make a whole bunch of money at the theaters because there were still COVID restrictions or because people were still afraid of COVID. So that's why it didn't make a whole lot of money. What? That's dumb. First off, the COVID restrictions, the harshest COVID restrictions that we had were in 2020, not 2021. This movie came out October 22nd, I believe, of 2021. That's a whole year and a half, honestly, after the strictest, most stringent COVID restrictions. If y'all remember, summer 2021, like summer 2020, obviously it was dead. But summer 2021, people were trying to get it popping again. And that's the summer, months before this movie came out. The whole idea of, people were still afraid of COVID, I don't buy it. People say, well, what about James Bond? I think there was even a Venom film that year. What about Venom? It came out in October of that year too, didn't it? What about him? So what? Oh, but they came out the same month. They cannibalized each other. Like, okay, did Barbie cannibalize Oppenheimer? No. If people really wanted to see the movie, they would have seen the movie. Period. There is no, but there was this and there was that. No. People heard that it was not that good of a movie. People heard that it was a confusing movie. People heard that it was boring. People heard that it was bland, and they didn't go to see the movie. You know how I know that this was probably more so the fact that all of the other excuses that people put out? I don't know if you guys remember this movie, but it was a little movie that came out just a month and a half later. It was called Spider-Man No Way Home. Mind you, I just saw Spider-Man No Way Home, okay? And I'll do a video on that in March, Marvel March. Spider-Man No Way Home came out December 2021, I think the 15th. So it wasn't even a full 2 months later that people magically got over whatever sort of COVID fears that they had within the span of less than 2 months. They got over all those fears and they ran out to see Spider-Man No Way Home to push it to become, I think it's top 10 now of all time, highest grossing films of all time. But Spider-Man is different. Is it though? Are you sure that it's different? Let's see how different it is. Both films had Zendaya in them. Oh, well, but Zendaya wasn't in Dune for that long. Okay, most people didn't know that before buying the ticket. I knew that because, like I say, I read some articles before the movie even came out, and no, they weren't review articles. I read behind the scenes articles in which Zendaya mentioned that she had only spent, I believe, 4 days actually shooting the film. So I figured, usually you have only about a minute, somewhere around a minute to a minute and a half filmed each day for most of these big time movies. And I hate to say that, to blow some people's minds with that, but Zendaya was in both of those movies. Like, okay, check. Both of them came out in 2021. Yeah, COVID was still around, but people didn't care about COVID when it came to Spider-Man No Way Home. Okay, check. Both of them came out in Q4, meaning that both of them came out around the time in which people were already opening their wallets looking for either awards fair or just a really good movie to end the year with. Okay, check. Here's when it starts to get crazy. Both films were based off of books, in Spider-Man's case, of course, comic books, that not only trend male, they trend white male, which is fine, but also both of them had a history that is almost 60 years old. Both Dune and Spider-Man first premiered in 60s. They first made their appearance on the scene, on the literary scene, in the zeitgeist in the 60s. Dune is the highest best-selling science fiction novel of all time. 65 million plus books sold, plus copies sold. Both of them had films before, film adaptations before. Both of them have had TV adaptations before. Spider-Man, of course, with the animated stuff. The only two things that you can argue is that, well, Spider-Man was more recently established as part of a bigger shared universe, and that Dune was on the same day and date streaming service of Max. It was released day and date, which is how I watched it at home. But even that is kind of weak. Spider-Man No Way Home made, what, like 4, maybe even 5 times Dune? Dune should easily have made $800 million. Now, I know some of you are probably going, 800, dude, that's ridiculous. Why? What is the reasoning behind why it shouldn't have made $800 million? And mind you, that is actually me discounting it. I am putting the streaming service discount in there. I am putting a COVID discount in there. Why shouldn't have made that much money? Yes, it was on the streaming service, HBO Max, now named Max. Yes, it was on that service. But it's not like HBO Max had the number of subscribers that it does now then. And number two, it's not like HBO Max even had a huge number of subscribers then. And that was the whole year in which they were trying to gain subscribers, which is why they did the same day and date releases of their films. I want to say that it was still less than like 50 million subscribers. It wasn't like HBO Max had so many subscribers that it should have taken out 50% of the box office. Like, no. You had Spider-Man No Way Home, and then, 6-7 months later, you had Top Gun Maverick. Both of them made tons of money. Tell me again why exactly Dune didn't make that much money. I'm trying to figure it out, because nothing except the fact that it just wasn't that good of a movie. Nothing stands out to me as, oh yeah, this is the thing that was the impediment for them making so much money. If you are going to stand here and honestly tell me that the subscribers of HBO Max, the people who streamed it, made up $400 million or $400 to $600 million, because in my mind, if COVID wasn't there, honestly, this movie should have made $1 billion. Again, it has history, so it's not like it's a new film. Avatar technically doesn't have any history, and it still came out and made however much money that it made. Avatar has literally just one film, and that was it. And they was just like, all right, yeah, let's go and see Avatar for however many times. Dune has had history. It has had plenty of adaptations. It has had a video game about it. It has plenty of people who are science fiction fans know that basically George Lucas pretty much crib noted. I mean, he practically stole the whole crib notes, the whole outline for Star Wars from Dune. Dune is counted as one of the most influential science fiction novels of all time. You're telling me that it couldn't have made $800 million in a time in which we routinely are seeing films that easily make over $1 billion? What history does it have to have in order to make that much? And on top of that, it has some of the youngest, prettiest, most beautiful, most gorgeous, most handsome actors and actresses that we have in Hollywood right now. This film epitomizes a lot of what I am saying the Avatar era is about. It is super beautiful and completely empty and devoid of almost any real intelligence, meaning, almost anything. It's so Avatar era. It is so Avatar era. So why then do I think that Dune Part 2 might be a bad movie? So many things. First off, I don't think that Warner Brothers actually believes in this film. I really don't. Yes, it is a Warner Brothers Legendary Pictures joint film, right? So they made it together, and I think Legendary did a lot of the financing, so they own like 50% of the movie, or maybe even more than 50% of the movie, and Warner Brothers is its distributor, I believe. I'm not quite sure what deal that they have, but Warner Brothers is in it just as much as Legendary is. But do I believe that they actually believe in this movie, that they believe in Denis Villeneuve's vision for Dune, what he wanted to do with Dune altogether? No, I don't. And almost every single thing about the movie tells me that they don't believe in it. One of the biggest problems with the Dune movie was the fact that a lot of people didn't know that it was a part one. That was without a doubt the failure of the marketing department. I knew, again, I knew that it was a Dune part one because in the same articles that I read where Zendaya said that she had only filmed for 4 days, for like 4 or 5 days on the film, it also said, yeah, this Dune is actually a part one because they divided the book up into at least 2 parts. And so I knew that it was a part one. Most people had no idea. And because of that foolishness, a lot of people went into it and they was like, wait a minute, part one? You mean we signed up for another thing? The problem is that the way they structured the movie, they didn't have a good and proper cliffhanger. Now, it's weird to me that this part two, apparently, from rumors that I've heard and read, they do have a cliffhanger. And I'm thinking to myself, Dune Messiah is a completely different book than Dune. Why would they have a cliffhanger between part 2 and part 3, but not really have one for part 1 and part 2? Have a legitimate cliffhanger. And this is when I'll let you in on a little bit of what I would have done. If I was setting this up as a part 1, the first one as a part 1, and then a part 2, I would have cut the film right at, instead of having that fight, the fight was superfluous. It was not a good ending for the film. It was, even though, yes, I know it was supposed to be, oh man, he's killing this dude who he thought was going to be his friend, blah, blah, blah. That was never played up as much as it should have been. And thusly, it didn't have the emotional impact that it could have had. Also, again, because Paul was such an emotionless character throughout, him killing this dude that he saw in his visions and that he thought might become his good friend kind of meant nothing. It was not the emotional stab to the heart, so to speak, that I think Denny and the other producers and writers on the film wanted. They should have cut it right when he's standing in front of the worm. That would have not only been a great cliffhanger, but it would have been a great way to leave the audience in a state of awe. Like, holy cannoli, that worm is giant. What is going to happen? And all the people who didn't or haven't read the book, they would have been freaking out for the next 2 years, which is another problem. Number 2, the fact that Warner Brothers was even involved in this film at all, and yet they did not, in both cases, they did not allow for parts 1 and part 2, or they did not allow for Dune part 2 and Dune Messiah to be filmed back to back together as one big conglomerate production, is so wasteful and so dumb that it's like, I know for a fact now that they don't really believe in this movie. I know for a fact that they don't believe in this movie. And you know why? Because of the fact that Warner Brothers has history with allowing big time productions in order to try to cut costs. In order to try to cut costs, they have a history of allowing big time productions to film as one big conglomerate thing. As a matter of fact, a lot of studios have been doing that as of late. Disney, of course, did it with Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3. They also allowed it with Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame. But Warner Brothers, and I don't know if you know this is some historical stuff, they did it actually with the first Donna Reeves Superman. Donna/Reeves Superman. I want to say it's on the cassette tape, like the video VHS tapes as well, but it might have just been in the theaters. I wasn't alive for this, but I read about it. The first Superman is supposed to have a trailer either at the end of the credits, another thing that Marvel gets credit for that they didn't do first, or at the very end of, right before the credits roll, they actually had a trailer for Superman 2 because they'd already filmed. They did it again, the same studio, Warner Brothers, did it again years later for The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions. They were like, okay, we have everybody blocked out. We have their schedules. We have some young stars. We know that they are in demand. We know that they might get scooped up by some other thing. We know that they might have other commitments to other projects, etc., etc. Let's film everything now while they all have time to film it. They've done it at least twice. And I can't remember if New Line Cinema was allied with another bigger studio, or if they just did Lord of the Rings completely on their own, as well as The Hobbit. I don't know. But remember, both The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, which they are now firmly in the Warner Brothers camp, both of them also feel as conglomerate productions, okay? Just, we're going to film all 3 films all together at once to save production costs, to save a whole bunch of money. Why they didn't do this? Because they don't believe in the movie. If they had, they would have allowed him to film at least part 2 and part 3 back to back together. But no, they're like, okay, we're going to see how part 2 does before we greenlight part 3. And I have this sneaking suspicion, because a lot of you probably are going to try to defend it and say, dude, Warner Brothers Discovery, they've already greenlit the Sisterhood TV show for Max. I have a sneaking suspicion that unless Dune Part 2 pulls in 750 million, it should pull in right around there to actually warrant them moving forward with pretty much anything else, including a sequel. But I have a sneaking suspicion that if it doesn't do that, if it doesn't do my number, which is actually a conservative estimate from my business perspective, I'm thinking that we never see that Sisterhood series. I just have a feeling like, yeah, we're not gonna see that. And it doesn't even matter that Dune Part 2 supposedly costs, weirdly enough, less to make than Dune Part 1. They're putting it at 165 million is what I saw. Weird. But then on top of that, the release date. I also just did a video on release dates. And I just said how there are 4 really bad months to release a film in. They are January, March, August, September. You never want to release a film in those months unless they fall under some sort of caveat or asterisk. But putting a film in March that is a sequel, and even worse, this is an even worse thing. And I've read rumors that it was Legendary's idea to do this, because we all know that, number one, Dune was pushed back from its original release date in 2023 October. And I'm like, okay, I get that, I understand, because the writer's strike and the actor's strike was still going at that point in time. I think the writer's strike ended early October, so it wasn't still going. But they made the decision, and this is another thing. Warner Brothers made the decision to push their films early, and they pushed 2 films, Dune Part 2 and Challengers. Both of them star Zendaya. This is the weirdest thing ever, okay? Because Challengers was supposed to be the lead-in for Dune Part 2 when it comes to like star power and stuff, but it was releasing it first was supposed to release in August, and then they pushed it back to September so that it could get into some of the I think Cannes or one of the film festivals around there. But then Dune was supposed to have a good release date in either October or November, which is a prime real estate release date. You can say all you want, oh, but it was going to have competition. The latest Disney movie, Wish, I think came out in November, but also so did the Hunger Games, that new movie, and I think it was a third movie that people were like concerned about. And I was like, so what? So what? Like, I just couldn't think of anything else. So what? And the Marvels. And I was like, okay, this is the competition y'all was worried about? Really? Give me a break. But on top of that, they pushed it back from a premiere date. Didn't move Wonka. They pushed it back from a premiere date into March. And I'm like, why? And not only did they push it into March, but they then moved it from March 15th, which is weirdly enough a better date than what they have it on now, March 1st. What? Hold on, wait a minute. You mean to tell me you moved the film up by 2 weeks? The dumbest thing ever. For starters, at least with March 15th, you might have been able to get some like super early spring breakers, some high school or college or even middle school kids who were on a very early spring break, had nothing to do but sit at home and ignore doing homework or watching TikToks all day, who was like, maybe we should go to a movie at the very end of winter. You might have gotten some of those, and even that is a might. But no, you push it to March 1st? For what? And it's not even like it's a month that has no competition in it. You still have Ghostbusters Afterlife, which again, that's releasing in March, and it's the sequel to the latest Ghostbusters reboot. So that's probably going to be bad as well. And you have a Godzilla vs. Kong, which again, another sequel. So that probably is going to be bad as well. Let's see here. You had no competition from Avatar this year because that also got pushed back. You had no real competition from Marvel Disney either, because since all of their films were lined up and the actors and the writer strike came, disrupting both the script production as well as filming, the only thing that they're actually going to be putting out of any value is the Deadpool and Wolverine film, which doesn't even come until July. You had a super clearing. It's like, to me, it's almost like having a private plane, right? Private planes are notoriously much smaller, obviously, than the big time jets that have doors that fly off. They are much smaller. You had all this runway, and you chose to, instead of landing on the runway, you chose to land on the mud and sand pit at the very end of the runway. what the heck is wrong with you? Or at the very beginning of the runway, what the heck is wrong with you? Even worse, and I hate to say this because in the future, I want to work for both of these companies. I actually love Warner Brothers. I really do. I would love to work for Warner Brothers. I would also love to work for Disney Marvel. I would love to work for Disney. I would love to work for Marvel. Honestly, I'm going to keep it real fresh and funky with y'all. I would love to be Kang. I would love to play the role of Kang, to step in for Jonathan Majors and play Kang. I think I can do it. I think I can do the role. And I might submit an audition tape. So I don't know. But with that being said, and I know that it didn't line up perfectly here. It didn't line up perfectly. It doesn't. But with no Marvel and with no major Disney thing, the first weekend of May was open. It was free and clear. You can look on the calendar right now, go into IMDb and look up coming to theater soon, and you can see that the movie that they have the first weekend of May is Fall Guy with Ryan Gosling. That's not to say that, Ryan Gosling isn't a star or that he can't pull people in, or even that that's going to be a bad movie. But it's like, really? You didn't want that date because Ryan Gosling is in Fall Guy, a remake of a I don't even know if it was a TV show or a film from the 70s. Okay, that scared you off? They were the first ones to delay their movies. They could have had choice pick of any release date the first the first half of the year, and they chose one of the worst times to release the movie. The reason why I say they could have done the first weekend in May, why, is because I think like it's May 3rd is that Friday, and then May 4th is Saturday. I don't understand it, and this is the reason why I mentioned Disney. I don't understand why Warner Brothers did not take the time to be as petty and as lowbrow as they could have been and release their Dune movie the weekend of May 4th. Nerds across the world, y'all know, you're watching the video right now and you sat through this whole thing. You know that May 4th is Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. That's a thing that they say. It blows my mind that they had a perfect chance to be petty towards Disney, a company that has routinely been petty towards them. If you remember, they knocked off a certain movie years ago because that particular Warner Brothers movie wanted to release on the same day that a Marvel movie was coming out. And Disney said, nah, bruh, we gonna stay with our day, forcing Warner Brothers to move to March. I'm gonna talk about that movie in a minute because y'all all know what it is. Then, on top of that, I just saw Spider-Man No Way Home. But in Spider-Man No Way Home, what did they have? They had the multiversal thing, right? And at the very beginning of the movie, if y'all go back and watch it again, the bully who is known to bully Peter Parker, the Flash, once Peter Parker's identity is revealed, he, in one of the scenes, quite literally says, yeah, I actually wrote a book about how I'm technically the Spider-Man's best friend. Spider-Man / Peter Parker's best friend. I call the book Flashpoint. They just took a jab at you. Warner Brothers, cow, right in your jaw, and laughed about it. And you have a great golden opportunity to be petty, and you don't take it? You could just hire me for one day, $100,000, Chief Petty Officer. That could be my title. Hire me as the Chief Petty Officer, and I will show you the way of pettiness that you could have done. All you had to do was release just one commercial and tell me that I'm not right about this. Release just one commercial which said, this May 4th, come out and see Dune. Witness, not just watch, witness the story that inspired George Lucas's Star Wars. And Disney cannot even come out and try to do anything against Warner Brothers because that is technically true. Yes, they could try to say, oh, you use Star Wars you use the Star Wars name brand in your advertisement. They can't really do anything. Movies can actually do that. They literally can actually do that. Or they didn't even have to use Star Wars. They could just say the one that inspired George Lucas's space opera. Come out this May 3rd to see it. This May 4th, may The Voice be with you. This May 4th, may Dune be with you. This May 4th, something with Dune. Be petty. Be pettier, Warner Brothers. Be petty. Disney did it already. That pissed me off so much. I was like, y'all had Y'all had it right there. But even on top of that, think about this. They would have manufactured a great piece of marketing that would have had the internet exploding in the same way that the internet exploded last year around Barbenheimer. I have a whole video that I'm going to release about how I think that Hollywood probably will learn the worst lessons from Barbenheimer. They're going to take the worst lessons from it. They're going to learn the bad stuff about it and not do some of the stuff that they should have. This was a great time for some viral marketing to make the movie go even bigger. And they chose not to do it. And I don't even think they thought of it. Instead, they put it again in March. And in March is a terrible month to release pretty much anything, especially a big time tentpole movie. Because again, that last movie that Warner Brothers released in March, that also happened to be a big time tentpole movie, that was also a sequel to a movie that was also fairly divisive and people didn't really know or couldn't figure out if they truly liked it or not. That sequel was what? Batman v Superman. And we all know what that did. That movie also became divisive, which, let's keep it real, fresh and funky. Saying that a movie is divisive when it's supposed to be this big time, big budget movie, we all know what we're actually saying. What we're actually saying is that, yeah, that movie sucked. It sucked, but the fans of those characters were so blown away at thinking that they might never see this again and that they didn't think that this would happen to begin with, that they are desperately holding on to the fiction that, oh, this was actually a good movie. They're going to hold on to that fiction until, and this is quite literally the only reason why I'm sort of kind of excited about James Gunn's DC universe, they're going to hold on to that fiction that Batman v Superman was a good movie until they see another Batman versus Superman kind of thing and have both of them on the screen at the same time. Then and only then are a lot of the fans who are still defending that crappy movie, only then are they going to finally just breathe and release themselves and say, oh, thank God. We can finally say that Batman v Superman really was a bad movie, that Dawn of Justice really was a terrible movie. We can finally say that because we have an actually good film. Releasing the movie in March? The only thing that I can see it benefiting from is the possibility that, yes, because Wonka did so well, people might still have a hankering for some Timothée Chalamet in the same way that that terrible Uncharted movie starring Tom Holland did well right after Spider-Man No Way Home. It was the drag effect, I say, is that, you know, we still want to see this actor in something because we're obsessed with him, so let's go out and see this thing. That's the only thing that I can think of as far as its box office goes. I did warn you guys that this video was going to be long, right? So I apologize for taking up so much of your time, but here's some of the things that I think I can, or that we can expect from Dune Part 2. Number one, first off, is it going to be a better movie? Yes. Automatically, I know this. I think, and again, I'm going to give it some positives, even though I still think that the movie is probably going to stink. It already has a plot line that everybody knows. We all know what the plot is going to be. It's a simple, super basic revenge plot. Similar to how pretty much almost every comic book movie, or excuse me, every superhero film, at least almost every Marvel superhero film, has been a revenge flick, whether it was the superheroes who were getting revenge or the villains who were getting revenge. Almost every single one of them had been revenge flicks. As a movie-going public, we are very aware of and we are very into revenge films right now. We just are. So they even showed it in at least, I want to say, 2 of the trailers. That, oh, you know, your father doesn't believe in revenge. Basically setting it up that, yeah, you know, one of the themes is going to be revenge and how he can get revenge and all that stuff. And they tried to set up, I remember some of the earliest trailers trying to set up this idea of, oh, we're going to go with the savior theme and how he's not really the savior. And I think they quickly abandoned that marketing ploy. Yes, once you get into the film, that becomes a very big thing and a very big theme. And it becomes super important. And it's great for discourse after the film. But as far as a marketing concept, it's too heady. It's like, you gotta water it down. You want people to actually come to the movie. You don't want people to be thinking about the savior and all. Like, just keep it simple, like the revenge thing did, and sort of having this line of Chani. keep those two things in there. But then I also have some other things which they are both positives and negatives. One of the positive negative things is that the characters and how they develop them, I think that in some ways they're going to go back and not necessarily retcon, so to speak, but they're going to go back and essentially have to rebuild the character of Paul Atreides. Because I swear to God, not only is he going to seem very much so like an almost completely different character from part one, because he is changing, especially in the back half of the Dune book, but they're actually going to have to give him things that they didn't give him in part one. Emotions. Like, they're going to actually have to make him a emotionally driven character, unlike what he was in part one, where they were like, no, you can't feel anything. I think it's honestly going to have, weirdly enough, the same level of action. It's just that because you now have a through line within the movie to where you know that revenge, this theme of revenge, is going to run throughout the entire movie, as well as a bit of brutalism is going to run throughout the entire movie. The action is going to feel more compelling. It's going to actually have legitimate tension. Now you know the consequences of certain things. The consequences of pretty much everything is death, or, well, yeah, pretty much just death. I think also they're going to have, see, here's the problem. I think they're going to spend quite a bit of time establishing characters that they should have established in part one. The Emperor, his daughter, why can I not remember his name? Y'all know was it, he's the nephew, right, of Baron? I think that they did probably a lot more legwork, foundational legwork, than what they thought that they did on part one. Basically, like we've already seen in the trailers, in one of the trailers, that Paul, he's talking to Chani and he's telling her about Kaladin. I think they're gonna actually have to, yes, establish the character of Kaladin, because they didn't do it in part one. Not only did we not see pretty much any of Kaladin, but we really don't know what kind of a planet it was. We didn't know if it was this really nice paradise-like planet. And as I said earlier in this video, we really didn't know how Paul felt about his home planet. We can't assume, again, that everybody feels a warm, fuzzy feeling about their home. We just can't do it. We, just as regular humans, we should know that that's not how everybody feels about their home, okay? So we have to establish that. Basically, what I think is that for this sequel, for part two, people are going to go into it and they're going to see it and they're going to like it way more than part one. But here's the thing. Unlike what a lot of people who loved and enjoyed part one, or who are big fans of the Dune book, and so they were like, oh, this is a great adaptation. When they said that they think, or that they had to see part two in order to believe that part one could be or would be a masterpiece in their mind if part two was good, what I actually think is going to happen is that a lot of people are going to see part two and they're going to like it a lot, so much so that they're going to kind of go back and think to themselves, well, wait a minute, is part one even necessary? And to be honest with you, I'm not sure that part one is going to be necessary. I feel like they're probably going to cover more than enough. They're probably going to have to go back and essentially do some expository recap through dialogue. It's not going to feel like an exposition dump, but they're going to do some sort of expository recap of almost everything that happened in part one, so that you don't actually even have to go back and see part one. Part two can probably just stand on its own as a good movie, which is why I'm saying that, again, this whole idea of we needed to see part two in order to judge part one is complete and utter rubbish. It's foolishness. It's ridiculousness. I think that part two is actually going to make part one look worse, not better. Probably going to be a very different movie. So I guess I can end sort of lastly on some of the things that I probably would have done if I was working on Dune. I would have, as I just said already, I would have cut the first one, part one. I would cut it at the worm. No battle afterwards. I don't want to see Chani, who, I just killed one of her friends, one of her people. I don't want to see her smiling at me, talking about, oh, this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning. I don't want to see that crap. I don't want to see him actually in the fight, and then him killing his first man, and him, Paul, also not really having an emotional reaction to it. Like, he didn't kill over like, oh, I can't believe I took a life for the first time, blah, blah, blah. He also had no emotional reaction to it. I don't want to see that crap at the end of the first movie. What I would have done is this, and I have one of two openings. If part one hadn't ended the way it ended, I would have ended it with the worm and Paul just looking at each other. Part two opens to where part two opens basically almost as a recap sort of montage, so to speak, where we're playing some of Hans Zimmer music, which, by the way, as an aside, I liked Hans Zimmer's soundtrack, but I will say this. I felt like the whole native woman yelling thing, I felt like that was overused in the movie. And the music in the movie, it's okay, but if you go and actually listen to the soundtrack on its own, that's when you can get to see, like, okay, there was some really good music here. But they seem to have used, honestly, some of the worst tracks that Hans made for the film. They used those in the movie instead. I'm like, it was just, the music was okay in the movie, but soundtrack, just go and listen to the full soundtrack and the bonus tracks and whatnot on YouTube, or find them, on iTunes if that still exists, or Apple Music or whatever. I would have had some of that music playing, and it would have just replayed some of the greatest hits from part one. It would have replayed Leto dying. It would have replayed some sort of scene in which Leto just grabs his son on the shoulder, and they just have a warm look between father and son, where it's like, they don't have to state the words, but there's an implied "I love you, son," more than anything in that. You show those types of things. You show the fight between him, blah blah blah. And as you're doing that, you don't hear anything within those scenes. They're all silent. They're all silent. The music is playing with Hans Zimmer, but they're all silent. And then you hear a subtle but strong tone, Paul. And at first, you think that it's Chani again, that he's having a vision of Chani, that it's a dream of Chani. Then a louder Paul, then a louder Paul. And then finally, the voice comes into full effect. And the voice comes into full effect. The music flattens out until it's just one flat, long note, like at the beginning of Dune Part 1 when they actually showed Dune, that and then you hear it's actually his mother, Paul. Boom. The smash opening from you go from the montage to a black screen, then to a smash opening of him standing in front of the worm, and his mom is running back to him to grab him on the shoulder and say, "Run!" Like, run. And then he takes off again, only to hear the thumper and turn around and say, "Oh, wait a minute." And then you go into the fight and all that stuff. That's the first one. If I had been working on Dune way back when they actually did Dune Part 1. But since Dune Part 1 was already written and it was out in theaters, then my second opening was this, is that the whole film opens on this. Dune Part 2 would open on with a very close-up shot of Paul. And his eyes are closed, and he's just breathing in and breathing out. We hear somebody calling Paul's name, right? And so we think that, oh man, he's dreaming again. It might be another dream. We can't know who's calling it. At first it sounds like Chani, then it sounds like his mom, and then, weirdly enough, it sounds like a male voice. And at first, it's like, is it Leto? Is it his father who's calling him? But no, we get another call, and it actually is one of the two dudes, either Gurney or Idaho. What's his first name? The Momoa character, Jason Momoa's character. He slowly opens his eyes, and as he opens his eyes, we pull the camera out, we crane it out, and we see that he's spread out. So of course you get the Jesus / Savior complex imagery. His arms are spread out wide, and he's just floating across some water. And he's actually on Caladan in a pool on the Atreides property, but it's outside. And so you have both Gurney and Idaho sitting poolside. At this point, the audience thinks that both of those characters are dead, right? We actually saw Idaho die, stabbed to death in Part 1, and Gurney, he just ran into war in one of the dumbest war scenes that I've ever seen filmed. Both these characters might potentially be dead at this point, right? That's what the audience thinks, people who haven't read the book. They're sitting with him poolside. They're just talking about stuff, talking about his future, talking about a ton of different stuff, talking about how his father wants him to prepare, and he's just being a kid, like, can I just stay here just a little bit longer, just float in this water a little bit longer, just because I feel free, I feel light, I feel like nothing bothers me when I'm in the water. And they say, what either Gurney or Idaho says, look, we are tough on you for a reason. But, and this is where the poetry starts to come in, there soon will come a time when we can no longer be soft and gentle to you. And then he swims over to the side of the pool. They're sitting on either side, and he looks past them, and he's like there on the pool, and past them, way down beyond the palace walls. He can see over the palace walls from where the pool is. He looks down, and he sees that there's actually a bunch of kids his age just playing, just living life. Now, I know that all of this is not in the book, right? It's not in the book. So people would probably be freaking out. Oh my God, you're changing stuff. It's not in the book, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Okay, I don't care. As a novelist, as a writer, I get it. You want to stay as close to the book as possible. But this would have been a great additional scene to add in, because it establishes both visually and from an emotional perspective, it establishes where Paul was before he went to Arrakis. And you see the kids, and he just asks something like, when will I be able to unburden myself? When will I be able to be around other people? When will I be able to be around people my own age, etc., etc.? And they tell him, unfortunately, never. Like, you won't be able to do that. You have responsibilities. For the frivolity of things like friendship and love and falling in love the first time, all that stuff, that is not for you. So don't look for that in your life. Then we understand that he has, just from that one scene, that one additional scene alone, you can understand that, number one, he absolutely loved Duncan, Idaho, and Gurney. That is reinforced yet again, and just how much he will miss him, he will miss them as his tutors and what have you. That is reinforced once again. But also it's enforced that, number one, he loved the water, he loved his home planet of Caladan, but that he also had a very complex and complicated relationship with his home planet, because he was never fully able to enjoy all of what his home planet had to offer. I know some of you are going to probably try and bring in, well, what about the bullfighting scene? And, when he talked about how his grandfather was a bullfighter, number one, I thought that the bull imagery was overused. And weirdly enough, number two, I actually got the bull imagery the first couple of times that I watched the movie, but I just realized last night that I watched it and I was like, they use that bull so much that I feel like it completely lost meaning from a thematic perspective. I don't know what the bull means anymore now. And so, yeah, it was kind of like, that was a throwaway thing. They could have thrown that away if you ask me. And this is something that I didn't bring up earlier. I meant to, but again, I forgot it. I was rushing. One of the things that I wanted to say is that a lot of consumers, a lot of you guys who don't write, and even a lot of writers, unfortunately, when they think of writing for screen, they think of show, don't tell. You hear that a lot. That, unfortunately, is not only wrong, but is a layman's way of trying to describe when a movie doesn't have like enough action in it or something, or there's not enough movement in it. It has always been, and again, this might be one of the reasons why there are a lot of bad writers today, because they have heard show, don't tell for so long, and that is wrong. That is straight up wrong advice. It has always been, ever since kindergarten, show and tell, or in this case, tell and show. You want to tell the audience what could potentially happen, or what you want to happen from the character's perspective, what you want to happen, or what you think will happen, and then show them what actually does happen, what they want to happen, or what will happen. You tell them and you show them. The problem is that you don't tell them and show them and tell them and show them and tell them and show them and tell them and show. You don't repeat the sequence over and over again for one specific event. You tell and then you show. I'll give you a perfect example, and then this will actually transition us directly into the quote thing and the thematic poetry and stuff. The best example is actually when Paul and Gurney are fighting in the training room, right? They did show and tell. You're actually supposed to tell and show. Tell should lead, show should follow. But the problem is that when they set up the fight, they set up the shields, right? And he's doing the blue shield. He's tapping the sword on his hand, and then he taps it through, and it turns red, and it actually can hit his skin. Which, first off, as an aside, on a tiny little tangent, I felt like that was completely inconsistent throughout the entire movie. I felt like I saw plenty of really fast swings and stabs, especially by Jason Momoa, by his Duncan Idaho character. I felt like there were plenty of them that were super fast that should not have gotten through the shield, but I digress. but they show that the slower blade goes through the shield. Then they tell us, Gurney then tells us as they are fighting that the slow blade penetrates the shield. What? That was the wrong way to do it. He should have said that first and then demonstrated it. And from there, it's like, yeah, you see? But no, he showed it to us. They showed it to us before telling us about it. So it felt redundant and kind of just dumb. Like, why would you do that? Tell and then show. Here's the real trick behind this. Writing. When writing prose, when writing novels, you have to be really good at prose. Or excuse me, you have to be really good at detail-oriented prose and figuring out how to get a story out. When writing screenplays, you have to be really good at short stories and being able to get a story out in a very short amount of time. But when adapting screenplays, when adapting something to a screenplay from a novel into a screenplay, you have to be a poet. You have to have a certain level and certain amount of poetry. You have to know that. So the last thing that I will leave you with, and I know it's been a very long time, is what I would have done to put poetry into Dune. Now, I know some of you are probably saying, well, Dune probably already has poetry in it. The novel does. The movies have not. They don't have any poetry. They don't have any through lines in them either. This would have been a great through line if I had been writing on Dune. If they had even just brought me in as the cleanup man, right, as a script doctor. We go back to the line that I mentioned earlier. They are brutal. That's the only line in the whole film that stuck out to me as being something worth a dang that you could have done something with. So here's the thing. And again, go back to my notable quotable video to understand why I say this next part. The next part, the line that I would have written, it would have been easily quotable. Okay. So you take that idea and it plays into the theme of how the Harkonnen, who I guess I have to mention this too as an aside. If I was going to restructure the films to actually have the part one have a legitimate plot, I would have focused it in on the Harkonnen and how they were losing the planet Arrakis, because they're the ones who actually have a legitimate plot. Especially if you've seen Baron Harkonnen try desperately to get his planet back from these filthy people who are the villains, only to realize that the Atreides are the good guys in the end, and the Harkonnen are the bad guys, as opposed to the other way around. That would actually have been a legitimate plot, because you would have understood that the Harkonnens you would have understood what the Harkonnens were trying to do. Focusing in on Paul, just as the book does, makes it so that there is no plot. They took a book that was said to be unfilmable. I have never believed that something is unfilmable, especially in this day and age with CGI and all that stuff. They took it and they basically said that they wanted to make a one-for-one translation and still have it look and feel unfilmable. They should have remixed the story and focused in on Harkonnen. They don't have to take things out of the story, just focus in on the Harkonnen and make them the center of the story. But they didn't do that. Okay, back to the line. They are brutal. You focus in on the brutality. In part two, I would have taken that line, brutal, and once Paul finally met, dang it, what is his character's name? Y'all know Austin, the dude who played Elvis. Okay, I can't remember his character's name, but once they finally meet and they have to battle, the thing that I would have had Paul come in and say is I would have had him announce in the most arrogant, most meanest way, like, dude, I'm here for revenge and stuff, right? The most meanest, arrogant way. I would have had him say, I was promised brutality. Arrogance all the way through. I was promised brutality. And then Austin's character would come back and he would say something to this effect. He would say something to the effect of, and brutality you shall get. Or have we not delivered on said brutality? Then brutality you shall get. Something to that effect. To where it's like, ooh, I know. And then finally, the fourth one would be if he is lording over one of the Fremen or whoever he is ruling over at the time. If they come to him and let's say there's some sort of like Solomon setup, right? So Solomon had to judge people within his kingdom, and they come to him and this person has maybe committed a crime or they've done something stupid against him. And he hears the man out, and the man simply says at some point, do not brutalize me, sir. Do not brutalize me, Lord. I forget what they call him once he's in charge. Like, do not brutalize me, sir. They are brutal. I was promised brutality. Be not brutal to my heart. Do not brutalize me, sir. To me, that is poetry. It captures the theme, the main theme that they were going for. It captures it, the Savior thing, it captures it perfectly on just how different, just the different conjugations of brutal and how they are applied each time to a different circumstance. They show a progression of the character. He has to be told that they are brutal because he is too naive. He then essentially wants for brutality. He was promised brutality because now he's too arrogant. That arrogance has turned him into something that not even he knows how to love anymore. He can't even figure out how to properly love and treat himself. So Chani is like, you're turning into something. Do not brutalize my heart. Stop what you are doing. Stop treating yourself bad. And then you won't treat everybody else bad. And then do not brutalize me, sir. And the last one, the fourth one is attack one. You can have either or, the Chani one, or just unnamed subject, or you can have them both. Do not brutalize me, sir. Do not brutalize me, sir. It's like, it's right there. It's right there. That's what I would have done if I was working on it. But see, I have this sneaking suspicion that the writers that were there, they probably did not see what they had. I have that suspicion. I don't think that they'll use the word brutal again. Now, if I'm wrong, and if I'm proven wrong about that, and they do have that poetry in there, more power to them. Clap, clap, bravo right now. That was my remote. But I don't see it. I don't see it being in there. I really don't. So I'm finally going to end this video here. It's been way too long. I probably will divide this into different parts. As a matter of fact, I might just film like you're seeing part 1, part 2, part 3. I don't know. But that's kind of what I'm feeling about Dune. Dune part 2 will most certainly be better, even though it probably will still stink as a movie. Warner Brothers does not believe in it. Otherwise, they would have not only allowed for him to film part 3 already, but they would have given it a better release date. And it's a perfect movie for the Avatar era. Movie full of beautiful people, nice looking sets, although the sets also look sterile, and it's an empty movie. And I feel like everybody kind of knows that. This is kind of why I had to dump Zendaya, because I had to say all this stuff. Me and Zendaya, we was having a secret love affair in the future. So I had to dump her just so I could say this stuff. I think, again, it should do somewhere around $750 million. I would, weirdly enough, well, I wouldn't be shocked. I would honestly be disappointed, even though I don't like the movie. And let me tell you, I'm not going to be seeing the movie in theaters. So if some of you actually like this and y'all stayed around the whole time to hear what I had to say, because y'all said, oh crap, he's bringing in a few bangers here and there, and oh man, I didn't think about this, I didn't think about that, yada, yada, yada. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be giving you guys a review anytime soon. I will see it when it comes out on HBO Max/Max. They shouldn't have shortened that. They should just kept it HBO Max. I'm going to see it when it comes out then in like 3 to 6 months. That's when I'm going to see it. Otherwise, no, I'm not going to the theaters to see this. Why? March 1st. March 1st. I mean, the only one, now that I think about it, they did release that, what was it, that the Batman, wasn't that released in March? That was also, that was also kind of not a good movie, but that's a whole nother video. That's a whole nother video where I'm going in on that one. A whole nother video where I'm going in on that one. But yeah, I just don't, I wish that it was, I hope that it's good. Let me say this. I don't actually have hate for any movies or any actors or actresses or anything like that. Well, except for the ones that do illegal and stupid crap. So I do actually hope that the movie does well. But ultimately, I'm feeling less and less icky, let's say, about talking about some of these films that are based on IP, just because I know that the way Hollywood works is, hey, if you don't like this version of it, there'll probably be a remake or a reboot of it in 20 to 25 years. I'm going to put a remake of this, of Dune. I'm going to actually push this one out, and I'm going to say that they don't remake this one. They don't try to touch this one again, whether it is successful or not, whether Dune Part 2 is successful or not, and whether Dune Messiah comes out or not. I'm going to put a remake of it at somewhere around 35 years from now. That's what I'm going to, 35 years from now. And then we'll see what filmmaker takes it over, their interpretation, all that stuff. But this one, it ain't it. The David Lynch one wasn't it. This one ain't it. The sci-fi series, I feel like they kind of got it closest, to be honest with you. But the graphics wasn't it. So, and the acting was just, you know. So, if you're a Dune fan, I feel like you just have to keep waiting. And I feel like that is where I should end this thing tonight. It's been a long night. I gotta get some sleep in. I gotta watch some stuff. Yeah. I don't have a sign. Everybody. So while I don't have an official sign off yet, I guess I should do the whole please like, comment, share, and if you so desire and you want to see more, subscribe. But more importantly, I will ask that you please, please, please go and purchase one of my books. They are mostly ebooks, and pretty much they are all under $10. See if any of my work is actually any good, if it lives up to any of the things that I'm talking about here on my channel, specifically with the entertainment industry videos. So please go purchase my books. All of my links are down below. Thank you.